Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about JavaScript and TypeScript. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, I have a technical question. As a self-taught full-stack web/app developer, I learned Dart and Flutter as my first language. And I'm willing to learn Angular 10 Node.js or Deno and Nest.js. The question the question is, can I learn TypeScript right away without learning JavaScript? Well, of course. Why would you not be able to? The like TypeScript, as you may know, TypeScript compiles down to JavaScript. It's uh, it's a language built on top of the JavaScript standard, and it simply it adds a little bit more, of course, but in essence all it adds is a type system, which is an enormously useful thing if you want to scale a application. If you or rather I would go as far as to say, if you're going to do anything that is less than something fairly simple, then TypeScript is a very good thing to use. What's nice about it, I think, is that sure, you don't need to learn JavaScript, but it doesn't really matter whether or not you focus specifically on JavaScript or not when you're learning TypeScript, because TypeScript is simply adding things to JavaScript. If you can read TypeScript code, if you can read TypeScript code, you can read JavaScript code immediately, because nothing that is happening in TypeScript, apart from, as I said, the TypeScript, the type system is going on in JavaScript. It's literally the same thing. You can even write JavaScript code inside of TypeScript. So like there's no real downside to it. The one thing I would say to you, which is going to probably be the main difference for you between JavaScript and TypeScript, is the surrounding tooling and the surrounding, like, the execution environments. An example would be that if you're running TypeScript, you're not going to just be able to plug your TypeScript file into, say, Node. You're not going to be able to put it into, say, the browser or something like that. That's where a lot of the confusion may occur. But honestly, it's the same thing with JavaScript. I think too, for a modern day JavaScript developer, probably one of the most complicated things is to understand the execution environments. I've seen so many software developers get really confused about, okay, what features do I have access to if I run my script in the browser? What happens if I run it in a test runner like Mocha or Jest or something like that? What happens if I use Deno, or like what does that do? Or Node and so forth. Like there's all these different runtime environments where you can execute this code, and you add an even higher layer of complexity on top if you add things such as, say, Webpack into the mix, where you might be using or Babel. Let's say that you're using non-standard features or things like that. There's specific syntax that might be only valid if you pipe the script through a bundler such as Webpack or a transpiler like Babel. And that's where it gets really confusing for a lot of people. And I can't walk through with you all these things. The thing that you should know for, like, the bare bone basics of TypeScript is that it is a compiled language, or, well, there's a compiler involved where you need to, at the very least, pipe it through something that transforms it into JavaScript in order to execute it in a JavaScript environment. But that, I think, should be a fairly straightforward thing for you to learn, because it's going to be part of the basics when you start learning TypeScript, that you need to do these sorts of things. So what I want you to take away from this is that there's absolutely no reason for you, if you want to learn TypeScript instead of JavaScript, then go ahead. The main difference between the two is that TypeScript is a typed version of JavaScript, and if you can read TypeScript code, then by extension you can learn you can read JavaScript code. The differences are that small. You're going to completely understand it. You may not, of course, be as familiar with it, and there are a few things to get used to, but at the end of the day, there's no real difference. I mean, the differences between TypeScript and JavaScript are smaller in some cases, I would say, than between C Sharp and Java, and they're basically derived from each other, or like C Sharp was derived from JavaScript from Java. So Java and C Sharp are very very similar, and TypeScript and JavaScript is even more similar. So I don't think that you have to worry about that. The one thing that I will warn you about is that it might be a little bit confusing, like what runtime environments can I use and how to set everything up with tooling and so forth. But honestly, if you learn TypeScript, I think that it's going to be like a fairly small effort for you to go and do JavaScript if you wanted to do just JavaScript instead of TypeScript. Have a great day.